Last stand at Missouri River, mountain men versus 150 warriors. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. Before we begin today's tale of the American frontier, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more historical narratives that shaped the West. The year is 1823. 40 men trudge along a riverbank in South Dakota Territory, their boots crunching on the morning frost. The sun hasn't risen yet. Each man carries at least two weapons, a rifle slung across his back and a knife at his belt. Some wear raccoon-skin caps pulled low over their eyes, others broad-brimmed hats stained with months of trail dust. Their pack mules follow behind, loaded with steel traps and supplies. General William H. Ashley leads from the front, his gray beard flecked with ice from the morning mist. He's a businessman first, explorer second. Every few minutes, he pulls out his pocket watch and checks the time. They need to cover 20 miles before nightfall. The beaver pelts in their packs are worth their weight in gold back east, where every fashionable gentleman demands a beaver felt top hat. Each pelt can fetch up to $4 in St. Louis, more than a week's wages for most men. Major Andrew Henry rides beside Ashley, scanning the cliffs that tower above the river. His experience tells him these high places are perfect spots for ambush. The local tribes, Blackfoot, Arikara, and Comanche, have already killed 7 trappers this season. Henry's seen what happens to men who get captured. The lucky ones die quickly. The company's newest recruit, Jedediah Smith, walks near the middle of the group. Unlike the others, his face is clean-shaven and his clothes are relatively new. A Bible bulges from his coat pocket. He reads from it every morning and evening without fail. The other men mock him for it, but never to his face. They've seen him shoot, seen him track, seen him work. What he lacks in experience he makes up for in raw talent. Hugh brings up the rear, leading 2 horses loaded with metal traps. Each trap weighs 15 pounds and has steel jaws strong enough to break a man's leg. Glass has been setting these traps for 3 years now. The process is simple, but dangerous. Wade into the freezing river, find a beaver dam, set the trap underwater near the entrance. Come back the next day to collect your prize. The beaver drowns quickly, keeping its pelt intact. Simple work, until a grizzly finds you checking your traps, or a war party decides you've strayed too far into their hunting grounds. The company has already lost half their original beaver traps, some to theft, others abandoned during hasty retreats from hostile territory. Without traps, they can't catch beaver. Without beaver, they don't get paid. They need more supplies, but most urgently, they need horses. Horses mean mobility, and mobility means survival out here. Major Henry pulls his horse alongside Smith's. "Jedediah," he says, voice low, "I've got a job for you." He explains the situation. They need to buy horses, and the nearest source is an Arikara village 2 days' ride south. The Arikara are known for their horse trading, but also for their unpredictable alliances. One day they'll trade peacefully, the next they'll attack without warning. Smith nods, already calculating the risks. He's only been with the company 6 months, but he's earned a reputation for good judgment. The men call him the quiet one, but they respect him. When he speaks, they listen. "Ride to Fort Ashley," Henry continues. "Tell the general we need at least 20 horses. The Arikara are our best chance." He hands Smith a leather pouch heavy with trade goods, steel knives, brass buttons, colored beads. As luck would have it, though later they'd call it misfortune, Smith encounters General Ashley himself on the trail. Ashley is already riding north from his fort, having heard about possible trade opportunities with the Arikara. Together, they make their way to the village, unaware that they're riding straight into one of the bloodiest chapters in frontier history. The Arikara tribe occupied the northern plains, farming the fertile soil while maintaining a fierce reputation in both trade and warfare. Recent encounters with white traders had left them wary and hostile. Despite this tension, they held one crucial advantage. Ashley's men carried guns and ammunition, resources the Arikara could rarely obtain elsewhere. This mutual need created an uneasy truce. The relationship between tribes and trappers wasn't always hostile. Over 50 fur companies across the territory employed hundreds of native people as translators, trackers, and trappers. Trade routes stretched 2,000 miles from New York to Oregon. By 1823, These commercial networks had existed for over 200 years, with tribes trading and warring among themselves long before Europeans arrived. The Spanish, French, English, Canadians, and Americans simply joined this existing web of alliances and conflicts. After initial negotiations, both sides agreed to continue trading the next day. Ashley divided his forces strategically, one group on land guarding supplies, and 2 boats anchored 30 yards offshore in the river. He took personal command of the boats while assigning Jedediah Smith to lead the land force of 25 men. The mountain men followed their usual evening routine. They cooked dinner over 3 separate campfires, cleaned their rifles and pistols, counted supplies, and prepared for tomorrow's trading. Each man carried 2 to 3 weapons, typically a rifle, pistol, and hunting knife. They had enough ammunition for 100 shots per man. But after the camps grew quiet, 2 trappers, Aaron Stevens and Edward Rose, made a fatal decision. They grabbed a bottle of whiskey and a bag of trade trinkets, then snuck toward the Arikara camp. Their plan was simple and foolish: trade alcohol and trinkets for time with Arikara women. The camp seemed peaceful at first. The 2 men found some women, but they quickly discovered they weren't alone. 15 to 20 Arikara warriors emerged from the shadows, enraged at the intruders attempting to violate their wives and daughters. Stevens had no chance to defend himself. 3 warriors cut him down with tomahawks, while Rose barely escaped, splashing through the shallow river in panic. Rose reached Smith's position, gasping out his story between breaths. Stevens was dead, he reported, killed by at least 3 warriors. The entire Arikara camp, estimated at 400 people, including 150 warriors, was now mobilizing for battle. In the pre-dawn darkness, the mountain men argued over their next move. They had acquired 40 horses through trading, a valuable herd that could mean the difference between success and failure of their entire expedition. Some men demanded they move the horses across the river immediately, putting the water between them and the expected Arikara attack. Others insisted they recover Stevens' body first, not wanting to leave a fallen comrade to be mutilated by the enemy. Each minute of debate brought them closer to dawn and the probability of attack. As the mountain men debated their next move, a solitary figure appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. An Arikara warrior stood 100 yards above them, his voice carrying clearly in the still morning air. He offered a deal: one of their finest horses in exchange for Stevens' body. After 15 minutes of tense negotiation through their interpreter, the trappers agreed, hoping to at least give their comrade a proper burial. The warrior disappeared back into the darkness. 30 minutes passed, each moment increasing the trapper's unease. When he finally returned, his message sent terror through the camp. Stevens' body had been mutilated beyond recognition, dismembered with ritual precision, his remains scattered across the camp as a clear message to the intruders. The description of the mutilation, delivered in explicit detail by the warrior, left several men vomiting and others gripping their weapons with white-knuckled hands. Smith knew they had minutes, not hours, before the full force of Arikara warriors would descend upon them. He ordered the immediate evacuation of their 40 horses. Working with mechanical efficiency, his men divided into 3 groups: 10 men leading the horses, 8 providing covering fire from the bank, and 7 watching the ridgeline for movement. Each man carried 100 rounds of ammunition. They would need every bullet. The horses proved difficult to manage in the darkness. The animals sensed the tension, snorting and stamping nervously as the men led them into the cold river water. The current ran strong. Spring melt had swollen the Missouri to twice its normal width. 15 horses had made it across when the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon. The sight that greeted them froze every man in place. 150 Arikara warriors lined the ridge in full war paint, their weapons ready. They had positioned themselves in 3 rows, front line with muskets, middle with bows, rear with spears. The warriors had claimed every scrap of high ground for 300 yards in each direction. Smith's men were trapped in the open, half in the river, half on the shore. The first volley came without warning. 50 musket balls and 100 arrows darkened the sky. 12 horses fell instantly, their bodies thrashing in the shallow water. 3 men dropped in the first seconds, 2 dead before they hit the ground, one screaming with an arrow through his thigh. The water around them turned red. Ashley's men in the boats, 25 trappers split between 2 vessels, opened fire with their long rifles, but the angle was poor. Their shots kicked up dirt around the warriors, but caused few casualties. Then disaster struck. Ashley's boat hit a sandbar 50 yards from shore, stranding them in the middle of the river. The second boat's crew panicked, cutting their anchor line and beginning to drift downstream. Smith demonstrated why he would later become a legend. Standing in waist-deep water, he organized the survivors into a fighting retreat. They used the dead horses as barricades, leapfrogging from one bloody shelter to the next. Each man fired and reloaded with precision. They couldn't afford to waste shots. 4 more men fell during this retreat, but Smith's tactics prevented a complete massacre. Ashley's boat finally worked free of the sandbar, maneuvering closer to shore. The distance between safety and death was just 30 yards, but it might as well have been 30 miles. The surviving trappers faced a terrible choice: stay behind cover and die slowly as ammunition ran out, or make a desperate swim for the boats. Smith gave the order to run. 15 men burst from cover simultaneously, hitting the water at full sprint. The Arikara unleashed everything they had. 6 men vanished beneath the surface, struck by bullets or arrows. 3 more were swept downstream by the powerful current, their screams fading into the distance. Of the 25 men in Smith's original shore party, only 6 reached the boats alive. Hugh Glass and Smith were among the last to make it aboard. They immediately took up firing positions, providing covering fire as Ashley's boats retreated downstream. The Arikara maintained their barrage for 2 miles downriver before finally falling behind. When the shooting stopped, the survivors took stock. 19 men dead or missing, 40 horses lost, and enough ammunition spent to have lasted the entire 6-month expedition. For many of the survivors, this marked the end of their fur-trapping careers. The horror of watching comrades die in the freezing water, the sound of arrows thudding into flesh, and the knowledge that Stephen's mutilated body still lay in the Arikara camp proved too much. They would seek safer professions back east. But for men like Smith and Glass, this was just the beginning of their legendary frontier careers. Many survivors boarded boats back to St. Louis, their spirits broken by the bloodshed. In the following weeks, 15 men quit the company officially, collecting their final pay of $2 per day. None blamed them. They'd witnessed death up close, lost friends, and seen the true price of frontier wealth. But 3 men remained resolute: Colonel Ashley, Hugh Glass, and Jedediah Smith. Their mission had evolved beyond mere profit. Ashley wasted no time gathering forces. Within 2 months, he assembled 400 U.S. Army troops, 50 experienced trappers, and 80 Sioux warriors who held their own grudges against the Arikara. Meanwhile, Glass, still recovering from a leg wound, fulfilled a solemn duty by writing to John Gardner's family. "Dear Sir, my painful duty is to tell you of the death of your son who befell at the hands of the Indians 2nd June in the early morning. He lived little while after he was shot and asked me to inform you of his sad fate. We brought him to the ship where he soon died. Mr. Smith, a young man of our company, made a powerful prayer which moved us greatly, and I am persuaded that John died in peace. His body we buried with others near this camp and marked the grave with a log. His things we will send to you. The savages are greatly treacherous. We traded with them as friends, but after a great storm of rain and thunder, they came at us before light and many were hurt. I myself was shot in the leg. Master Ashley is bound to stay in these parts till the traitors are rightly punished. Your obedient servant." This letter revealed 2 crucial aspects of the aftermath: Glass's deep humanity in the face of violence, and the first recorded testament to Smith's moral character. While Glass wrote, Smith himself traveled 200 miles north with a French-Canadian trader known only as Le Grand, recruiting 60 more experienced frontiersmen to support Ashley's campaign. Their combined force would launch an offensive against the Arikara within 3 months. The ripples of that bloody morning spread far beyond the immediate survivors. the U.S. Army established 3 new forts along the Missouri River. Trading companies began hiring minimum groups of 50 men for expeditions. The Arikara faced increased military pressure, eventually leading to their displacement from traditional lands. Within 5 years, the entire structure of the fur trade would transform. The blood spilled on the Missouri's banks that June morning forever changed the dynamics of the American frontier. While some survivors found peace in eastern cities, others pushed deeper into unmapped territories, their nightmares mixed with an unquenchable drive to master the wilderness. The violence birthed new alliances, ended old ways of life, and drew lines that would shape the West for generations. Every man who survived carried dual burdens, the weight of memory and the knowledge that they'd witnessed a pivotal moment in frontier history. Their stories became legends, passed down through generations as warnings, inspiration, and reminders of the true cost of America's westward ambitions. Thanks for watching. Experience more gripping tales of the American frontier by joining our community at Native Legends and History Stories. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications for weekly episodes that uncover the raw, unfiltered stories that shaped our nation.